Hello, it's July 5th, 2017, and you're watching LifeTalk. I'm Mark Crutcher.
And I'm Renee Hobbs. Thanks for joining us.
Forgot to introduce myself.
That's okay.
That's all right.
We know who you are.
Yeah, all the wanted posters in the post office make sure that people know who I am, right?
No, that's not true.
Anyway, you had a nice holiday, I hear.
I did.
Despite the fact you were camping.
I know it. It was a very successful camping trip, I must say. A very relaxed one.
Let me tell you what the most successful camping trip is that can possibly be. Is
I
the one
bet
you
it's
don't
don't
go
go on.
The one you don't go on.
I bet that was what you were going to say.
Right.
Yeah, and then we get back, and there were fireworks going off in the neighborhood last night, and I think one of my dogs almost had a heart attack.
Yep.
I do essential oil, so I had to put some peace and calming on her, and I think it worked a little bit, but
It works on dogs too.
it does, yeah,
Oh,
absolutely.
Really? Okay.
Yep.
Whatever you say. All right. Well, while you were off camping and I was here at the office,
Yes.
we got a phone call that we get occasionally, and it relates to a subject that we've talked about here on Live Talk several times, and I think we need to remember this. Remind ourselves of this occasionally. This lady called, and her 13-year-old daughter pregnant, and this woman's pro-life, her daughter's pro-life, but this woman's mother, the grandmother of the girl that's 13-year-old that's pregnant, and this woman's ex-husband, the father of this girl that's pregnant, are hammering on her to have an abortion.
So she's being tugged in both directions
Right.
here, it sounds like.
And this mother needed some advice, and in the beginning of the call, it appeared that she might be even open to this possibility, even though she's pro-life, so to speak. You know, anytime somebody says, I'm pro-life, but that means they're not pro-life. That means they're fixing to tell you something that means they're not pro-life.
They're trying to outweigh their
Right.
decision here, yeah.
Right. But anyway, after I spoke with her for probably an hour, and at the end, I think she was totally 100% on board. As a matter of fact, she was making plans for doing prenatal care, and I talked to the little girl for a minute, and
She just needed somebody to talk to.
you know, the woman finally said, you know, I think the reason I called you was for you to talk me out of it. I knew you would,
Yeah.
and that's why I called you, because she knew who we were. She was
Right.
a follower of Life Dynamics. But in any event, it reminded me, this whole conversation reminded me of something that you and I have talked about in the past. The pro-life movement, or let's just say the whole pro-family movement, if you will, the Christian conservatives, I think sometimes we unwittingly shoot ourselves in the foot over on the abortion issue. And by that I mean, we go out here and we push abstinence, which we should, and we try to tell our kids not to get pregnant, not to have sexual relationships.
It's not moral to have sex until you're married.
Until you're married, right. And we tell them about especially the girls, we tell them all the horrible things that can happen if you get pregnant when you're 15 years old, or this girl was 13.
It can ruin your life,
Ruin
your
your life.
career.
You're not going to be able to get a career. You're going to be on welfare for the rest of your life.
You're not going to find a husband that's going to want to marry you.
Right.
Et
So
cetera, et cetera.
we tell them all these horrible stories. And then when they get pregnant, we are upset if they go out then, and they've been indoctrinated with this, and then they go out and do the one thing that Planned Parenthood is telling them will help you avoid all of these
All
problems.
of those problems, yeah.
So if they go to Planned Parenthood, or Planned Parenthood puts out things on the internet or whatever, telling them exactly what their parents have been telling them. Your life is over. You'll never get a job. Nobody's going to want you. You're going to be saddled with this baby, yada, yada, yada. We cannot be surprised then that those kids have abortions.
It's true.
And, you know, I had this, I think the first time I talked to you about it, I told you about, I had this situation with another employee that worked here at Life Dynamics years ago. And when her daughter was about 15, she came to work one day telling me how they had sat down with her and told her all the things about not having sex, and about if you get pregnant at your age, it's going to ruin your life, and the whole thing that everybody, that we just laid out here. And I asked her, I said, well, let me ask you a question. Do you think you set your daughter up for having an abortion? And she said, well, no, my daughter, you know, she knows how we feel about abortion.
Well, because of the disappointment and finding out that she's pregnant,
Right.
she went against everything that they
Right.
had believed in or
Right.
had been taught.
What we need to make sure our kids understand is that, yes, on first place, you should not be having sex if you're not married, period. End of story. That's a given. However, if you get pregnant at 15, it is not the end of the world. Lots of people have gotten pregnant at 15, 14, 13, 12, whatever,
Right.
and gone on to live happy lives. And you also need to let your kids know, and this is what we did with our daughter, is say, look, we expect certain standards from you, but if you don't meet those standards, we're going to love you no matter what.
We're going to work through it.
Right.
Definitely.
And, you know, if we don't want you having sex when you're 15, but if you do and you wind up pregnant, it is not the end of the world.
Well, and something that you've had said repeatedly and talking to me personally and just in past shows is the baby is not the mistake. And I agree with you 100% on that. The baby is not the mistake.
He's not the problem.
He's not the problem.
That's right. But Planned Parenthood will tell you that he is.
Right.
And when Planned Parenthood is telling you that the baby is the problem, and all that child has heard from her parents is that the baby is the problem,
Right.
you can't expect them to stand up against Planned Parenthood sales pitch.
She's going to feel like she's doing the right thing by terminating the
baby.
The baby.
Right. And so we've got to, you know, let me tell you, I often tell this story, and of course, as our audience, many of our audience knows, I lost a child. My wife and I had a baby that died the day after she was born, as a matter of fact. And that's the end of the world. You know, when you're sitting there and your baby and the doctor says, I'm sorry, she's gone, you know, that's the end of the world. Or when I've told this story before, there were some kids here in Denton. This was 6 or 7 years ago now, probably. This little boy's father had bought a new car. And he sneaked out of the house that night and took his father's new car and 3 of his buddies with him. And they ran a light down on 35 and interstate where it intersects with 35. They ran a light and got hit in the side.
Killed them.
Killed all 4 of them.
Yeah. That's the end of the world.
When your doorbell rings at 3 o'clock in the morning and the guy says, I'm from the Denton Police Department and your son's been killed, that's the end of the world.
Yeah.
But your kid coming home pregnant, as much as you don't want that to happen, and as much as we need to be giving the moral argument against the problem here is the premarital sex, not the baby.
Right.
And you hit on that a moment ago. That is the central issue we need to be, because that's what Planned Parenthood is telling these kids. They're telling them the problem is the baby. They're lying to them. But you can't expect those kids not to buy that lie if our Christian culture is sitting there telling them that same thing for years.
Well, and there's no greater joy than having a newborn baby
Right.
welcomed into your house, you know, and going through that whole process of that child being pregnant and going to the doctor and getting the prenatal help that she needs and
Right.
the care that it takes to, you know, nurse a child with a child,
Right.
so to speak. And you have I don't know if you want to share this or not, but there was a story of you running into some people at a restaurant down the road that
Right.
she had heard you.
I've relayed this story before, and we were at a restaurant here in Denton one time. This was, heck, I guess it's been 20 years ago now. And these people came up to me and they said, aren't you Mark Crutcher? And I said, yes. And this lady said, well, I've meant to call you a couple of times and tell you about a story. And she said, and then I just happened to see you here. So anyway, they were from Dallas, and they were traveling through Denton and happened to stop at this same restaurant. Turns out that this lady had seen me on a talk show here in Dallas, Fort Worth, on the PBS station. And she had watched this debate on abortion because her neighbor or a friend of hers was the pro-abort that I was going up against. And she said, I watched this show, and she said, I never understood what all the hubbub was about and why you guys get so passionate about it and the people on the other side get so passionate. And she said, but I watched that show, and when it was over, I can't really say that my mind had been changed much by anything either one of you said, but she said, there was one argument that you made that really bothered me. And she said, it kept on going through my head. And she said then that, coincidentally, a few weeks later, her sister came to her. Her sister, who happened to live next door to her, came over and said, this was a very close family. And she said, my niece, her daughter, was 15 and pregnant, and that they had scheduled an abortion, and would I be willing to go with them just as moral support? And she said, I told them, well, yes, I would. I'd be happy to. But I said, let me ask you a question. And she said, I brought up the thing to them, and I can't even remember what it is because it seemed pretty insignificant to me, but it wasn't insignificant to them.
Mm-hmm.
And she said, I brought up the thing that you had said that had bothered me. And she said it bothered her too. And so that night when their husbands got home, they brought them in because this abortion was already scheduled and this was what everybody was going to do, and brought up that same issue, and it bothered all of them. So the four of them then brought the little girl in and said, we're not going to talk you out of having this abortion. We're not, but if this is what you want to do, but we want to bring up this issue. And so they brought up this issue that was bothering all four of them that I had brought up on this debate. And they said, would you ever consider not having an abortion? And she said, we were astonished by what she said. She said, I never wanted to have the abortion to begin with. And she said,
it was just an assumption that she wanted to have this abortion
because
she was so young.
Because she was 15 years old.
Mm-hmm.
And she said, I would rather have the baby and place it for adoption than have an abortion.
Absolutely.
So that's what they planned on doing.
Mm-hmm.
So they rocked forward. And they said, well, we'll help you, and we'll help you if you'll promise to stay in school and yada, yada, yada. So she did, and they're going forward. And just a month or so before the baby was born, this little girl came to him and said, listen, would y'all be mad at me if I said I wanted to keep the baby and I don't want to place it for adoption? And they said, no, we won't be mad as long as you agree that you'll stay in school. We'll help you, and we'll just,
right.
And
take turns.
Yeah, she said, we sat down in the kitchen and we all said, okay, we're going to lay out a schedule, and you're responsible for the baby this time, and then when you come home from school, then you have to take care of it, but then we'll take care of it these other times. And she said, we're looking at this like some kind of gigantic burden that we're all going to have to share.
Yeah.
And she said, but that's the way families operate. And she was the one, I think she was the first one that said, we decided that this is not the end of the world. That's where I got that term that I've used over the years. Mm-hmm. She said, we decided this is not the end of the world, and yeah, we can pitch in, and a baby's, a 6-pound baby's not going to come in here and destroy this family. Right? No. And she said, so we all said, okay, we'll suck it up, and we'll take the responsibility, and mm-hmm. we'll sacrifice. She said, now we fight over who gets that baby.
Of course.
She said, we argue and fight over who gets that baby. She said, that little boy, it turned out to be a little boy, she said, mm-hmm. that little boy is the center of our lives. She said, at this point, my daughter is now a freshman at SMU, and the little boy is 3 or 4 years old. She mm-hmm. said, we fight over who gets to take care of him, and we have fought over who gets mm-hmm. to take care of him since the day he was born.
Oh, I bet he still to this day feels
spoiled
the love.
Rotten. He is spoiled rotten.
Spoiled rotten, for sure.
No worse than my daughter or you or my wife or any of the rest of y'all that I spoil. But nonetheless, so this is the point that we're trying to make here. Whether the child turns out to be a burden or a blessing depends on your attitude about it.
It's true.
And
absolutely
children
true.
Are a blessing.
That's right.
And what your attitude about that child is, if your 15-year-old comes home and tells you she's pregnant, that's not something any of us want. You've got a 14-year-old. You don't want that for your daughter.
Almost 15 in 2 weeks. That's right.
Right.
I do not want her coming home pregnant.
Right. But if it happened, it would not be the end of your lives.
Oh, yeah. I would be right there with her.
And so whether that baby becomes a burden to you
mm-hmm.
or a blessing to you
mm-hmm.
has nothing to do with that baby. It has everything to do with you and your mental attitude.
That's right.
And we need to quit selling this idea. And I understand why people do it. I'm not criticizing. I understand why people tell their children, you don't want to be getting pregnant. Tell their daughters, don't be getting pregnant. You'll ruin your life, and you'll never get a job, and you'll never get a husband, and you'll be saddled down with this baby for the rest of your life. But you cannot be doing that. We got to make sure these people understand having a baby, even when you're not planning it, and you're 15 years old or 14 or 13 or 12, whatever it might be, it is not the end of the world. Mm-hmm. There are so many worse things that can happen to you than having a baby.
Right.
But if you go into it with that mindset,
mm-hmm.
then it's going to be a problem.
Well, and you can work around all the obstacles that get in your way.
Right.
If there's a will, there's a way. If it's important to you, then you'll be able to
right.
to move along.
You always find time, and you always find the way to do what's important to you.
That's right.
So you got to make this baby important to you, and that baby is important whether you think so or not. And
yeah.
That's where we are.
That's where we are.
You got anything else?
Nothing else.
just tell people to be sure to send in their questions or comments.
Oh, yes.
You forgot to do
You
that.
did. Yes. If y'all have any
I'm getting tired of having to do your job, Renee.
if y'all have any suggestions for us on shows, let us know. We would love to hear them. Just send them to my email address, renee@prolifeamerica.com, or you can call the office, and you can find the number. It's real easy to find.
Yep. So anyway, let us know what you want. Comment on past shows. We do get some comments. Do you have comments there?
I do, yeah. Somebody says that you'll drop all that you're doing to take phone calls from either post-abortive girls or girls that are calling to have an abortion, which is very true. We know that.
Right.
Then we have many girls that call us that are post-abortive and they need help, and so that's a blessing to be there for them, to help them.
We get blessed.
We do.
By being able to talk to them.
This is part of the ministry.
And it's really a blessing, too, when you have a situation like this that comes up and you go home thinking, I saved a baby today.
Yeah.
A baby I'll never see,
Yeah.
but I saved, a baby is going to live
Yeah.
because of something I did today.
Amen to
and
that.
I cannot tell you what a blessing that is. So,
And Erica on here, she said they tried talking me into abortion when I clearly didn't want one. So it's such a sad situation.
Yep.
So.
Anyway, that's all the time we have. Until next time, remember, Life Dynamics is not here to put up a good fight. We're here to win, because winning is how the killing stops. We'll see you tomorrow.